I was really tired and stressed from living in the city. He kindly offered to let me use his family's old cabin. "It's not a fancy place," he told me, "but it's very quiet. You can finally relax and clear your head." The drive there was very peaceful. I watched as the tall pine and birch trees slowly surrounded the road. The smooth highway eventually turned into a bumpy gravel path, and then into a small twisting dirt road. It felt like I was driving into the past. I arrived as the sun was bleeding its last light over the treetops, cast in the clearing in long, distorted shadows. The cabin was a rustic, sturdy thing of dark-stained wood, looking exactly as promised, simple and silent. That first night was idyllic. I built a fire in the stone hearth, the crackle and pop a symphony after the city's white noise. I read by lantern light, the words seeming more profound in the profound quiet, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep to the lullaby of wind, sighing through a million needles. The next day, I followed a hand-drawn map Mark had scribbled to a nearby lake. The hike was a delight, the trail a soft carpet of fallen leaves. The lake was a perfect, glassy mirror, and I spent hours there in peaceful solitude, eating my sandwich and skipping stones. But the walk back felt different. The forest seemed denser, the path less distinct. A low-lying branch I was sure I'd ducked under on the way there now seemed to block the trail entirely. A subtle, primal unease began to itch at the back of my neck. The feeling of a tableau having been rearranged in my absence. I shook it off, attributing it to the disorienting symmetry of the woods. But that night, the peace was gone. The familiar sounds of the forest, the hoot of an owl, the scrabble of a possum, now sounded like signals. Every rustle outside the window felt deliberate. I jerked my head up, staring into the impenetrable blackness beyond the glass, my heart hammering, seeing nothing but my own reflection staring back, wide-eyed and pale. The feeling of being observed was a physical weight, a pressure on the cabin walls. By morning, the idyll was shattered. The unease had solidified into a cold, hard dread in my stomach. I decided to leave. As I hurriedly packed my bag, a sound froze me. A crisp, unmistakable crunch of a footstep on the gravel path outside. I stood statue still, barely breathing. It came again, closer. I crept to the window, peeling back the curtain a fraction of an inch. Nothing. The clearing was empty. I bolted. I threw my bag in the passenger seat, fumbled the key into the ignition, and reversed down the dirt track so fast the branches screeched against the car's paint. As I swung onto the slightly wider path, I slammed the brakes, my eyes snapping to the rearview mirror. There, just at the tree line where the clearing met the woods, stood a figure. It was tall and unnaturally still, a man-shaped void in the dappled light. I couldn't make out any features, just its dark, silent presence. It wasn't moving toward me. It was just watching. I stomped on the accelerator, my tires spitting dirt and stone, and didn't slow down until the forest was far behind me. Weeks later, back in my apartment with its familiar hum of traffic and distant sirens, I almost convinced myself it had been a trick of the light, a stress-induced hallucination. Then one night, walking home from a late shift, I felt it again. That specific chilling pressure between my shoulder blades. I spun around, my eyes scanning the well-lit street, the closed shop fronts, the neon signs. And there, deep in the mouth of a service alley, swallowed by shadow, it stood. The same figure, the same profound stillness. It was here. It had followed me. The city's noise, once a comfort, now felt like a curtain, behind which anything could hide. I double lock my door every night now. I check the peephole compulsively. The fear has not faded. It has simply relocated. It's in the reflection of a dark window, in the stillness of a hallway at night. The woods didn't just show me a watcher. They introduced me to him. And some introductions, once made, are permanent. I wanted to be completely alone. I chose to spend a week in the old cabin to get away from the loud and busy world. The cabin was just one small room made of logs. It smelled like old campfires, wet soil, and the sweet smell of old wood. To get water, I used a rusty hand pump outside. The only way to heat the room was with an old stove that burned wood. It was perfect for me. For 3 days, the silence was a balm. I read, I wrote in a journal, I took long walks without a destination. The only sounds were the natural ones, the chatter of squirrels, the whisper of the wind, the occasional cry of a hawk. On the 4th night, as I was drifting to sleep on the squeaky iron-framed bed, a new sound inserted itself into the chorus. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was faint, coming from the direction of the heavy oak door. A branch, I thought. A curious raccoon. I pulled the rough wool blanket higher and willed myself to sleep. But it continued. A soft, persistent scraping, like fingernails being dragged slowly down the wood. It wasn't random. It had a rhythm, a purpose. My heart began to beat a nervous tattoo against my ribs. I lay there for what felt like hours, every sense hyper-focused on that door. Finally, anger at my own fear overcame my trepidation. I grabbed my heavy metal flashlight, a poor substitute for a weapon, and yanked the door open. The night was absolute. The blackness outside was a solid wall swallowing the beam of my flashlight after only a few feet. There was nothing there. No animal, no branch, no sign of anything that could have made the sound. The forest was silent, holding its breath. I closed the door, my unease now a living thing in the room with me. The next night, it returned. Louder, more insistent. Scritch, scratch, scritch. It was no longer a request, it was a demand. I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, the flashlight held in a white-knuckled grip, pointed at the door, until the first gray light of dawn bleached the windows. By the 6th night, I was a hollowed-out shell of a person, jumping at my own shadow. The scratching was no longer just at the door. It was at the windows. It was on the roof. It was a multi-layered symphony of scraping, a frenzied, desperate attempt to get in. The cabin, my sanctuary, had become a prison. The walls seemed to bulge inward with the pressure of whatever was outside. I could hear it breathing, a wet, ragged sound that wasn't human. I couldn't take it anymore. As the scratching reached a fever pitch, a sound of splintering wood, I made a break for it. I threw the door open and ran. Not even bothering to grab my pack, I crashed through the undergrowth, branches whipping my face, my flight driven by pure animal terror. I didn't look back. I made it to my car, to the town, to my own modern, well-lit apartment. I told myself it was isolation, paranoia, the product of a tired mind. For a few days, I almost believed it. Then, one night, as I lay in my own bed, the familiar sound began. Scratch, scratch, scratch. From the other side of my bedroom door. My blood turned to ice. I hadn't brought anything back from the woods, nothing physical, but it had followed me. It had learned my address. This morning, I woke up and saw them. 4 long, deep gouges in the wood of my bedroom door, as if made by impossibly strong, sharp fingers. They start at the top, and rake downward. The message is clear. It's not outside anymore. It's in the house. The forest didn't want me to leave. It simply decided to come with me. And I know, with a certainty that chills my soul, that the next time the scratching comes, the door won't hold.
The rental listing promised quiet and private place. It wasn't very private, but it was way too quiet in a scary way. The cabin was a cute, old-fashioned A-shaped house sitting under huge, ancient redwood trees. The quiet was so total and heavy that it felt like something was in the room with me. For the first 3 days, it was perfect. On the 4th night, the symphony of the forest was interrupted. I was reading by the light of a propane lamp when a rustling, too close and too deliberate to be a deer, circled the cabin. I froze, book forgotten in my lap. It was followed by the unmistakable sound of a footstep on the porch, a heavy, deliberate creak on the 2nd step from the top, the one I'd noticed squeaked. My heart leapt into my throat. I killed the lamp, plunging the room into darkness, and crept to the window. Peering through a gap in the curtains, I saw nothing but the monochrome world of the moonlit clearing. The sound stopped. I spent the night huddled on the couch, a kitchen knife on the coffee table, jumping at every snap of cooling wood from the stove. Dawn brought a thin veneer of courage. I ventured outside, my eyes scanning the perimeter. And there they were. A set of fresh, deep boot prints, size large, circling the cabin. They pressed deep into the soft earth right under each window. Someone had been peering in, watching me. The rest of the day was spent in a state of high alert. I locked every window and door, though the flimsy locks seemed laughable. As full dark fell, the sounds returned. This time, they were bolder. A heavy weight leaned against the door, testing its strength. I heard low, muffled breathing. Then, a sound that made my blood run cold, a slow, deliberate dragging sound along the outside wall, right next to where I sat trembling. It was the sound of a fingernail or a blade being dragged over the wooden siding. I called out, my voice a reedy, frightened thing. "Who's out there? I've called the police." It was a bluff. There was no cell service. The only answer was a low, guttural chuckle that faded away as whatever it was moved back into the trees. I didn't sleep a wink. At first light, my decision was made. I would pack and leave immediately. My hands shook as I threw my belongings into my suitcase. Fear had eroded all rational thought. I just needed to be gone. I opened the front door to leave and stopped dead. Pinned to the outside of the door with a long, rusty nail was a single piece of grimy, lined paper, torn from a spiral notebook. On it, scrawled in thick, frantic charcoal letters that seemed to scream from the page, was a single word: leave. I didn't need to be told twice. I left everything, my food, my books, the security deposit, and fled. I drove like a man possessed until I found a ranger station. The ranger, a weary-looking man in his 50s, listened to my frantic story. When I mentioned the note, his expression changed from polite skepticism to grim understanding. "Those woods," he sighed, rubbing his brow. "We get reports, strange lights, sounds, folks going missing for a night, coming back, different. Never find anything. No evidence. Just stories." Back in the city, I try to laugh it off, a prank, a territorial hermit, but the fear is a seed that took root deep inside me. Now, when I'm walking my dog at night and a branch cracks, I jump. When I hear my neighbor's floorboards creak, my heart races. The warning wasn't just for the cabin, it was a preview. The world feels less safe because I know what can hide in its quiet corners. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I'll start awake, certain I can hear the slow, deliberate drag of a nail against the outside wall of my apartment building. My solo camping trip was a test of self-reliance. I'd chosen a spot by a glacial lake, a 3-mile hike in. The first day was pristine. Crisp air, the scent of pine, the lake's surface like polished blue glass. I set up my tent, gathered firewood, and felt a profound connection to the peaceful, indifferent wilderness. The change was swift. By afternoon, the sky, once a brilliant blue, curdled into a bruised purple and gray. The wind picked up, whipping the lake into a froth of whitecaps. I barely had time to secure my gear and dive into my tent before the sky opened up. The rain wasn't a shower. It was a deluge, a deafening roar on the taut nylon fly. Huddled inside, I felt a thrill of excitement. I was weathering the elements. Then, another sound wove itself into the percussion of the rain. A rustling, close. Too close to be the wind in the trees. It was a wet, dragging sound, just outside the thin fabric of my tent wall. My excitement curdled into anxiety. A bear? A moose? I unzipped the tent flap a few inches, the cold rain spraying my face. I shone my flashlight out into the murky twilight. The beam cut through the sheets of rain, illuminating swaying ferns and dripping branches. Nothing. I was about to dismiss it when the sound came again, this time from the other side of the tent, near where I'd stored my food barrel. Adrenaline surged. This was no random animal. It was purposeful. Stealing my nerves, I decided confrontation was better than being trapped like a rat. I burst out of the tent, flashlight held like a club, the rain instantly soaking me to the skin, and there he was. Crouched by my food supply, a figure so drenched and mud-spattered, he seemed like a creature born of the storm itself. He wasn't a large man. He was gaunt, shivering violently. Our eyes met. His were wide, not with malice, but with a raw, animal fear that mirrored my own. He stumbled backward, falling into the mud, mumbling apologies I couldn't hear over the storm's din. The fear in my heart didn't vanish, but it transformed. This wasn't a predator. He was desperate. I gestured for him to follow me to the relative shelter of a giant cedar tree. We sat there, under its sprawling branches, the rain drumming a slightly softer rhythm above us. I wordlessly handed him a granola bar and my water bottle. His hands shook so badly he could barely open it. He didn't speak, just ate and drank with a frantic urgency. When the rain finally eased to a drizzle, he simply looked at me, nodded once, a gesture of profound, wordless thanks, and melted back into the dripping forest. I never got his name. The next morning, the world was washed clean and sparkling. I packed up, the encounter feeling like a strange dream. It wasn't until I was back in civilization, stopping for coffee at a diner near the trailhead, that I saw the local paper. On the second page was a small article, "Search continues for missing hiker." The description, a man in his late 20s, last seen wearing a green jacket, matched the man from the rain. The article said he'd been missing for 5 days. He'd been reported as emotionally unstable, prone to paranoia. A cold dread settled over me, colder than the mountain rain. I had shared my food with a lost, scared man. But as I drove away, a new, more chilling thought emerged. The forest is vast and ancient. What if the thing that found him after he left my camp wasn't the search party? What if the paranoia his family mentioned wasn't an illness, but a warning? I see his face every time I close my eyes. I didn't just witness a missing person. I may have witnessed the last moments of a man being slowly claimed by something the woods had already planted inside him. It felt like a discovery from a storybook. The cabin wasn't on any map. I'd stumbled upon it during a long, aimless hike, drawn by the sound of the babbling stream beside it. It was old, built from logs gone silver with age, but the roof was sound, and the door, though unlocked, swung open without a protest. It felt like a gift from the forest itself. I decided to claim it for a weekend. The first day was magic. I drank from the cold, clear stream. I sat on the porch and read as sunlight dappled through the leaves. That night, I lit a candle and felt a peace so profound it was almost spiritual. Then, the forest went quiet. The normal night sounds vanished, leaving a void. Into that void stepped a new sound, a heavy, crunching footstep on the gravel path outside. I blew out the candle and pressed myself against the wall beside the window. Peering through a crack in the shutter, I saw a dark shape move past. It was large, human. It paused at the door, and I heard the soft scritch times of a hand testing the latch. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't a hiker. A hiker would have called out. The figure moved away, but I heard it circling the cabin, its footsteps a slow, deliberate crunch on the gravel. It was checking the windows. It was hunting. I was the prey. I grabbed the only thing that could serve as a weapon. a heavy, cast-iron fireplace poker. The circuit of the cabin completed, the footsteps returned to the porch. The door handle rattled, then shook violently. A shoulder slammed against the solid oak door. Once, twice. The old wood groaned in protest. I stood paralyzed. The poker held high, my breath caught in my throat. On the third impact, the lock splintered with a sound like a gunshot. The door flew inward, and the figure filled the doorway, a hulking silhouette against the slightly less dark night. I didn't think. I screamed, a raw, primal sound, and swung the poker with all my strength. It connected with a sickening thud against the intruder's shoulder. He grunted in pain and surprise, stumbling back out onto the porch. In that moment of shock, I surged forward and slammed the door shut, throwing my weight against it, my hands fumbling to slide the heavy crossbar bolt into place, a bolt I hadn't even noticed before. I heard a low, guttural curse from outside, then the sound of heavy, retreating footsteps fading into the woods. I didn't move until the sun was high in the sky. When I finally ventured out, the door was scarred and splintered. There were no footprints, the gravel revealed nothing. I packed my things and left, the idyllic cabin now a place of nightmares. The hike back felt different. The friendly forest now felt like it had eyes. Every shadow seemed to hold a hidden threat. The cabin, when I glanced back one last time, stood silent and innocent. But I knew its secret. It wasn't a gift, it was bait. And the darkness that lurked around it wasn't just in the trees, it was in the silence, in the feeling of being utterly, completely alone with something that knew you were there. That darkness had followed me out. It's in the way I startle at a slamming door, in the way I check and recheck my own locks. The forest showed me that some places aren't abandoned. They're occupied by things that don't want company. Story 7, The Unwelcome Welcome. The plan was pure, uncomplicated fun, a weekend at a friend's family cabin with 4 of my closest friends. We arrived in a convoy of cars, music blaring, filling the quiet woods with our laughter. The cabin was picture perfect, a sturdy log structure with a wide porch and a stone chimney already puffing smoke into the crisp evening air thanks to Dave, who'd arrived first. The first night was everything we'd hoped for. We told ghost stories by the fire, played cards, drank cheap beer, and reveled in our temporary ownership of this little piece of wilderness. But as the night wore on and the others drifted off to sleep, a subtle unease began to prick at me. The woods outside, which had felt welcoming by firelight, now felt like a vast, black ocean pressing in on our tiny island of light and noise. I was the last one awake, finishing a book by the dying embers of the fire, when I heard it. A soft creak times from the porch. I froze, my book lowering. It was probably just the old wood settling. Then it came again. A deliberate footstep. Then another. Slow, measured, like someone pacing. My heart began to thud. I checked my phone. 3:17 a.m. I woke Dave with a shake. Shh. Listen, I whispered. We both sat in the dark, listening to the footsteps make a slow circuit of the porch. A dark shape passed by the window, blotting out the moonlight for a second. It was tall. Dave's eyes were wide with a fear that mirrored my own. The figure paused at the front door. We heard the soft, metallic jiggle of the handle being tested. Then, silence. A long, agonizing minute passed. Then, the footsteps retreated down the porch steps and faded away. The others, when we woke them, brushed it off. A bear, Sarah said sleepily. Or a drunk local messing with us, added Chris, already rolling over. But Dave and I couldn't shake it. The testing of the handle that was intelligent, purposeful, we decided to cut the trip short. The next morning, under a bright, cheerful sun that made the previous night feel like a bad dream, we loaded our cars with subdued haste. That's when I saw it. Lying on the porch floorboards, half hidden by a rocking chair, was a single, large work boot. It was caked in fresh mud, worn down at the heel, and it stank of sweat and pine. It was too big to belong to any of us. A cold dread settled in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a random prank. Someone had been out there. They'd been watching us laugh and play cards through the windows. They'd listened to our conversations, they'd tested our door, and they'd left a calling card. A message. We weren't on a fun getaway, we were trespassing. We left in a hurry, the mood in the car somber. The fun was gone, replaced by a lingering sense of violation. Back in the city, the others moved on, chalking it up to a weird story, but I can't. Days later, I still feel watched. I find myself looking over my shoulder in crowded streets. That boot was a reminder that the world has deep, dark corners where things don't follow the rules. We thought we were visitors in those woods. The boot told a different story. We were the entertainment. And the show was over. But the Watcher? I have a sickening feeling the Watcher is still out there, waiting for the next group of city kids to bring their noise and their light into his quiet, dark world.